We're on down there, Becky, you good?
Yeah, I think we're okay. Yep, the mic is on and the camera is on.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and start the meeting. Purpose of this meeting is to address some of the questions the budget committee had regarding the revenue sources that come into our budget. We want to get some clarification on how they're calculated, where they go, how they're spent, how it all comes together. As far as the process goes for the budget. Just get a little better understanding before we get into the expenditure side of the budget. So we asked Becky if she would put a little presentation for us. So Becky, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. So I've numbered the pages. And then there's letters to the that are associated with numbers on additional pages behind that. So if you take the page 1 and page 2 and lay them out together, you see the entire Civil City working budget. This is what we prepare each year. And this will tie in all the revenue as we go along. So right now, we do have a budget estimate in for 2026, and that is our first line. On page 1 are our property tax funds. So we rely on property tax to supplement these funds, general, MVH, park, and cumulative capital development. And currently in this budget, the only raises we've added are for fire because that's contractual for 2026. We've not added any raises in for any other general fund departments, MVH or park. And then on page 2 is a continuation of funds. The funds names, the names are across the top. These are funds that receive revenue by miscellaneous revenue and different sources, non-property tax. So that's why they're separate. Because on the first page, we're calculating all our numbers to get a tax rate and our levy, which is the amount of money we can raise. So let's just first look at page 1. So after the budget estimate, we look at circuit breakers. So this $12 million is an increase of approximately $3 million over 2025. And if we go to page 3, this is what the state provides us. And you can see the different years and the 2026 estimate. So that is what I have plugged in.
Do we know why it's so much higher?
Because of our different losses. And the changes in the
Assessments?
Yeah.
Okay.
well, not so much the assessments, but SE1,
Which I see one.
Senate Bill 1.
Oh, okay.
So it's all cumulative. Yeah. So I do feel this is a conservative number. I don't believe, I sense it won't come in that high, but I believe we should use this number. We have so many things going on. We'll plug this number in, and that's what we'll use to calculate our budget. So moving on, that's how we get our circuit breaker. So, and then the necessary expenditures for 2025. This comes from what is left of our 2025 budget that has not been spent. So we look at our expenditures and all these funds, and this is the balance. Traditionally, we do not spend our budget 100%, but that's the number that the DLGF requires we put in. Have to put in to the penny, to the dollar, what is left to spend.
So this is your estimate of what will be left to spend
That's,
by the end of 2025.
that's our estimate from our 2025 budget of what will be spent.
We typically spend 90 to 95% of our budget.
Okay, so 32,000. So this is an estimate though, obviously. Okay, I get it.
Well, it's an exact number
As of today?
as of 6/30.
Okay,
These numbers are based on June 30th. So what we're doing is an 18-month budget. We calculate for the last 6 months of the year plus 12 months of 2026.
Okay, thank you.
That's why we have that 2025 number in there, the balance of our expenditures. Now, the next line, if we knew we were going to have additional appropriations in the last 6 months of the year, we would drop those numbers in as well. I do not have anything in there right now. So then we add all those three numbers together. The 2026 budget, circuit breaker loss, because we have to account for that. And then what's left to spend in 2025. So those are the total funds required. Then we use our cash balance from 6/30, June 30th, and we plug those numbers in. And the cross fund report that is sent out every month, so those ending numbers are cash balance numbers. Then we get an estimate of what we're going to collect in December. And that is on page 4. Letter D. That last column is our estimate. And you can see the column before that, June property tax distribution. It's a bit higher. They estimate appeals and some additional circuit breaker for year end. That's why December distribution is always lower than our June distribution. That's how we get that revenue. Now, the next line that's labeled column A, form 2, that is C and D. These are miscellaneous revenue calculations. So on page 5, you'll see about 2/3 of the way down, a C and a D circle. That is those numbers. So that's miscellaneous revenue. And all these different items come into play. And so we have our property tax funds they're all grouped together just for ease of viewing. And then the rest of the page and the next page covers the working budget, page 2, for those miscellaneous revenues. Because you'll see on page 2 of the working budget, we have column A and column B miscellaneous revenue as well. So back to our first page. After we plug in the revenue, so the funds to be raised are going to be the funds required. Let's look at general fund, 84 million, less total revenue of 52 million, almost 53 million. And those are the funds to be raised, and that's the same. 52, I'm sorry, 52.
Okay.
Yeah, so 84 million minus the 52 million
I
is your 31 million that needs to be raised, and that's the same calculation for all 4 funds.
So at the end of the year, or you combine this, it's 35 for all.
Yes.
I am going to ask a dumb question. You'd think I would understand this by now, but I'm confused. Back up at A, under circuit breaker, and this is a circuit breaker loss, but you're adding it in.
Right.
How does that work?
So that's required because when we get down to E, our max levy, that has to be included.
Circuit breaker has to be
Yeah,
included, even if we don't get it.
Right, because it's an expense. It's considered an expense.
Okay. Okay,
So I'll continue though.
yeah, thank you.
So we have the amount to be raised and we're going to skip down to the assessed valuation. This is how we get our tax rate. We got a few numbers through here. So I'm using an assessed valuation of 1.3 billion.
What page are you on?
Or I'm sorry, first page right here.
Okay.
We're down there. And you'll see a computation of the actual 2025 AD of 1.955 billion. And we're always told to reduce our assessed value for these calculations. Some municipalities go down as low as 50%. And as you lower your assessed valuation, it pushes your tax rate higher. And this is a best practice. This is just in case that come 2026, the county made an error in assessed valuations or some type of revenue is not correct. This protects us by making sure we are collecting our max levy, the maximum amount that we can collect. So we want that high tax rate as the calculation.
Can you I'm sorry,
Mhm.
gotta walk through it again. So we have 1.3 billion in assessed valuation.
And you see how we got that?
70% of that.
70% of this year's actual AV.
Oh, thank you. That's what I was missing. Okay. Okay.
And who gives us the actual? Is that the county, you said, or the assessor?
DLGF. Department of Local Government Finance.
Gives us that number.
Mhm. So then, right below the assessed valuation are the in-place tax rates right now. So if you look under CCD, you'll see that that's calculates evenly at 0.05. So it's your fourth fund. Right here. 0.05. You'll see that it calculates exactly to 0.05. We had to add some money into the operating line. So it calculates that because that fund is set at 0.05. That doesn't change. So to make this work, we just add a little bit of money in that operating line to make the tax rate 0.05 for that fund. Now, over to the left, we have the factor adjusted tax levy. And that is from the 2025 max levy multiplied times our growth quotient. This is part of our budget review every year. We take the growth quotient times the current max levy, and that gives us our new tax levy and our new money. And you'll see that for 2026, our new money is $1.5 million. And if you recall before, they've frozen our growth quotient at 0.04. This is going to be this third year in a row. And for 2026, if it had not been frozen, we would have received 5.6% instead of 4%. So we've been, hurt by the lower growth quotient. Now it's going to be 3 years in a row. And there's a little chart right there on the lower part of the sheet that shows previous year's growth quotient. So back to our factor adjusted tax levy. That's our current levy plus the new money. Then they add CCD in separate. And that's how you get your max levy with CCD. And so if you look on page 8, it's also the same calculation provided by the DLGF. So then back to our first page, working down under the max levy of the 40 million, you see our working budget levy. That's the net amount to be raised currently. 35,879,554. So without any raises besides fire, we're only under the levy by $4 million. So any expenses we add to this, it's gonna drop that number. And if we can adjust any revenue or add any revenue, that will increase that number. So we like to have that number pretty big. And then what you do, whatever you have under the levy, you put it in that operating line. We already have a value in the CCD line, but we will add all that money between general, MVH, and park. And that's kind of like a surplus. You want that because when you add that to your operating, that's going to change that tax rate for that fund. And that's how you move the money between the funds, because you only have one levy that you have to share between those four funds. And the tax rate does that. So you'll hear in the presentation today that for 2025, we did move some rate into MVH because they were, you'll see on the graph, they took a big dip. And then for next year in the presentation, we're moving some rate back to the general fund to boost that up. The 4 million that's very low, and we still have raises or whatever else we're going to do to that. And if we're able to, we still do have some revenue adjustments. We still have the rest of the budget meetings to go through with our staff. So we are going to have some movement revenue wise to help that. And we still haven't done calculations. What does a 1% raise do to this? What does a 2%? We haven't done those calculations. So that's still to do. If we want to look on page 5 and 6 again, these are exactly where the revenue numbers come from. And on pages I have a little more. Page 7. Page 7 matches up those letters to budget form 2. Those are also provided by the Department of Local Government Finance. And any number without a letter, those are based on past history at the city. For example, dog licenses and park receipts, building permits. We put in, we calculate our number based on history and projections. Whereas any item that has a letter attached to it, that number is given to us by the state. And these all flow to our working budget.
And opioid settlements are not included on this anywhere, correct?
Right, that's a separate fund.
Are there other separate funds?
Yes.
Can you give us an example of what some of those are?
Community, CDBG, community block grant. I mean, these really are the ones these are the ones the council appropriates.
I understand.
So,
I was
yeah.
just curious about other funds that aren't listed on here.
We have gift funds, we have.
Hey, can you, sorry, but what does CCD stand for?
cumulative capital development,
Okay,
and that is earmarked for our IT capital items, IT service contracts. TIF isn't in here. That's the big one. Commercial vehicle excise tax,
and you get that once a year.
twice a year with our property tax.
Okay.
These, the page one of the categories that we from. I mean, all the. Well,
It's two.
All both of them.
but
And those are all in the budget books.
these are all in the budget, but these are like separate, aren't these the separate ones? So they're like,
They're the miscellaneous income.
correct,
Though, these are the property tax.
right. Property tax only.
No, they do get the
They get some-
miscellaneous revenue, but they're the only ones that get property tax.
Gotcha.
Like we had other, Cume Sewer used to get property tax, but we brought that rate back to the general fund.
Would you repeat all that, please?
No. You can listen to the recording at a later time.
Yeah.
So, just like, I'm looking at last year's budget, or I'm sorry, 2026 budget. So seated, we got 15 million. Or no, this is for this year. You're estimating 15 million for seated this year, total revenue?
That's with the cash balance. That was with our cash balance at 6:30.
8.4.
5 million is our estimate for next year.
Of what? Oh, what you'll be getting. Okay,
Yeah. 2 million is the balance of this year.
okay. So, but now I'm looking under seated in the budget and it goes to all kinds of different things.
Right.
Right? So,
It can be spent on any approved governmental expenditure.
right. So, and these are the things that some years you're funding X with seated and some years you're using seated for something else if you need to. It's something you can move around.
We've had to rely on CEDA more than ever.
Mhm.
And then the bottom line is, though it says funds to be raised, that's from the previous page. That's the cash balance that should be left after the 2026 budget. This line right here.
I understand
Okay.
that. I'm looking for where it reflects on here.
It
It doesn't.
does. It's not the same. Technically, it's surplus will be whatever we have left to put in operating. That technically is our surplus.
So is the cash balance at the end of, like, say, at the end of 6:30? Is it this 26.6 plus the 49.2 in the other column? I mean.
That's all of it together
Oh, this is all of it. 49.2, that's our quote unquote cash balance
for these funds.
for these funds.
Mhm.
How does that compare to like other years? About the same, a little less? Do we have to dip into it a little bit more past years or past year?
It's been fairly steady.
Oh, I see. So this is just a continuation of this.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, got it.
Taylor, can you think of anything? Happy to answer any questions, or if you come up, think of anything later,
Questions?
Hopefully this helped explain a little bit on revenue and how it flows into the budget process.
This is really helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Quick question. You said that the levy that, we're at 4 million, which is a little bit lower than what we're used to. What do you feel more comfortable with? I know
15.
15.
In the teens.
It's been that number before.
Which is 20%.
Yeah.
As we raise our budgets, that affects this all too. It all flows forward. It's 24 to 25 went from 70 million to almost 77 million. So that was a big jump. A lot of that was, we had extra raises for some people, fire, we look at fire had a jump. So that kind of compounded where we're at right now. We knew we were going to eat into some of our cash. We knew that, but then we get, the surprise of Senate Bill 1.
I mean, I saw that the mayor
Thank you.
from Elkhart said that they're going to support you. I mean, that number is a lot more than I thought. Am I missing something there?
Wow.
Well, no. What is our number? What do we project over the next 3 years that we might lose from SB one?
15 million,
Is it 15 now?
Well,
20%. Now, that's not just an overall cut. That is us going into our cash reserve, using our reserves plus the cuts.
not really sure how he came up with this number. You'll see in the presentation, but kind of dives down. And we know, we like Baker Tilly to be conservative and, based on past presentations, I would be surprised if we went down -15. Of course, we cannot do that, but, that is a higher number than we've ever been given by them. We've been able to bounce back when they projected out 4 million, 5 million, maybe -1 or 2 million, the other funds, but we'll need some help with the legislators or some
But what Mayor
bigger
said,
cuts.
that extra 4 million is going into our funds. The 11 is still this number that was given to us. Here's what gave us this. Estimated net levies and then.
That's from the LS, yeah.
So
Back from
the 11 million for the 3 years, 26, 27, 28, is that still what we're going with plus another 4 million?
I'd have to review those numbers again, but
That was my question too. That was my recollection that when we first got that run after the end of the session, that it was 11 million. So that, I'm gonna make sure that, to piggyback on his question, I also would like to understand, it's digging into cash that comes up to
The other 4.
constitutes the extra 4 million.
I don't know how the LSA came up with their numbers. We don't know them. We don't know that they've ever been here. Baker Tilly knows us. We've been working with them for 25 plus years. They know who we are.
I agree. I tend to trust that number more than I do the
This was
11.
released, it was, like you can download it from, I think, the Tribune's website.
Yeah.
And be mindful of who they work for.
And as a general statement, wouldn't it be more conservative and protective of our finances to go with the higher number if there's any consideration which of the two is more accurate?
yes.
And, we're no stranger to having to deal with big fiscal issues. We had what we call the fiscal cliff, which was the 10-year delay for us coming into property tax caps, which culminated in 2019. We had 10 years to work towards that. We have essentially already begun for what's gonna be imminent in 3 years. Next year's budget's gonna look a lot different from this current year's budget. It already does,
2026, you're referring
Right.
to.
427,
426.
oh, 426. Right, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Sorry. Any other questions?
What you were accepting donation?
Lottery. Play the lottery.
Doesn't really look like you get that.
Yeah, where is
You know,
Yeah. It hasn't increased. Ever.
The scary thing is we don't just lose the property tax revenue, we lose the local option income tax revenue. So seated, we we're just talking about gone. Public safety, local option income tax, $4 million gone.
it's gone.
And then our ability to raise replacement revenue is just limited to 1.2%, which we have to then affirm each and every year in a special meeting. And that probably doesn't even cover what we're losing, going to be losing in lit. So it's multiple whammies.
It's on the media coverage of the Elkhart information that Tony referenced. At least there was some representation that municipal local option income tax, if you will, would be stacked on top of the county option income tax. So it's not as if that totally goes away. It may impact our revenue, but the resident is going to see the county tax and then what, if any, municipal tax that would be
Right.
added on
So
top.
they're stacked. Ours would be limited to 1.2. The county could then do an additional 1.2. Right now, we're maxed out at, we're not maxed out, but we're at 1.75 total. Again, we can go to 1.2. The total the county can go to is 2.9, I believe.
2.9 is the total. They can have 1.2 plus the 0.4 fire
Or
EMS.
fiery. And so there's the potential that the county could adopt, not the tax council, but the county could adopt a fire EMS lit 0.4%. And for God knows whatever reason, police got pulled out of that.
Yeah.
And so that's just fire EMS. And that we have no control of that. The county has to pass that. And then it goes to fire territories, townships, and certainly cities and towns.
On the topic of option income taxes, I recall during the budget process last year that we talked about, at least at that time, if I remember accurately, that the anticipated property tax revenue for 2025 looked much different than what we had seen in prior years. That it was, that we were concerned about a decrease in that revenue. Am I remembering that correctly?
In the lit?
Yeah.
Yes, we did get, our estimates are lower than 2024.
So, and undoubtedly it's in here and I'm just not smart enough to be able to pick up on it, but is there information that shows us that drop and gives us an ability to be able to track how that's been impacted over time?
We did receive, there is some lit estimates in the presentation,
Okay.
but the state never gave us a very good explanation. It was like 1/4 of individuals' income tax was so much lower. I mean, even DLGF was trying to dig into it. The county was trying to dig into it. And it was a real, because, lit had been increasing pretty nicely each year,
Mhm.
and then it just dropped.
Do we know if that trend continues for 2026 or is it?
No, it shouldn't drop. It should be,
But it still reflects that drop from 2024, so it's baked in now, at least for this coming year.
right, though we haven't received those estimates yet.
Okay.
Baker Tilly, I believe, has an estimate. I just put in a conservative number in this working budget.
Sure.
That will still need to be updated.
Thank you.
We had some meaningful discussion with the governor last week, several mayors, myself involved in that. We certainly understand that there was a push for property tax relief. He attributes it to COVID and some of the expenses, some of the inflation and such that came out of COVID. And while that could certainly have been a factor, the system was always kind of meant to self-correct. So it's based on market conditions. So if it went up and it started to come down, it was going to self-correct. Well, instead, we did kind of the overreaction and bake that into a permanent correction, artificial correction. And so now these cuts, well, we're all in favor of targeted property tax relief that, elderly that's somebody's lived in a home for all these years. Now all of a sudden their bills are such, if they're on a fixed income, they can't afford it. I mean, certainly we are sympathetic to that. But what has been passed is now a reaction to what happened. And then now it creates kind of an artificial correction that stays with us forever. And so we're not optimistic we can get a lot of fixes downstate, even though they say they will fix it. Don't know.
And isn't it the case that, at least based upon the initial understanding of the impact of Senate Bill 1, that, and again, we're all in favor of property tax relief for our residents, but the number that sticks in my mind was $300, that the most that an individual could hope for was $300, but there was no guarantee that every individual was going to receive that $300. Many people stood to receive much less than that. And then if there are other tax rates that fill the void of that $300, you really may not end up ahead, if at all, as a homeowner, correct?
That is correct. So we are left asking the question, if we have to, the average property owner in Mishawaka or St. Joe County, if you value their home and they get their property tax relief and it's a certain much, you calculate based on the average, then if you take if the income taxes are maxed out, so out of one pocket, you're gonna save a little bit of money, but more money is coming out of this pocket, and then our services are cut to the bone. So if you're the average citizen, what do you gain? I mean, you're paying more, your services are cut. And so this was done without a lot of input of the impact. There's a freight train coming down the track, and we're left asking these questions. We have to cut our essential services to the bone. We provide the services that are most closely felt by our public. The state's first response was, well, gosh, the governor asked, and we cut our services 5%. Well, that's great, but I could poll 100 Mishawaka citizens, and they probably couldn't tell me the services you provide at the state level, with the exception maybe the BNB. They're going to feel our cuts. And it's.
So it seems to me that without continuing the work that you've started already, and that's much appreciated, and without us working together, council and administration, to try to navigate through this, that we're really going to be forced with some unfortunate choices of which services that our residents currently enjoy and that they want to continue to receive, aren't we going to be able to provide, or at least continue to provide in the same fashion that we have in the past? Is that a pretty good summary of?
So if we take this conservative estimate of 20%, hopefully it's only 15% or 10%. But if it's 20%, 74% of our budget is public safety. We can't make cuts anywhere else that will have any meaningful impact. So 74% of our general fund budget is public safety. We lose the lit, which is another $4 million. And so how are we supposed to buy $1 million fire engines? Or how are we supposed to buy $100,000 police cars, let alone pay salaries and things of that nature? We're in a situation where it is dire if this plays out.
And with regard to those non-public safety services, isn't it true we need to be able to continue to provide those? Because if we don't have roads that the police and fire vehicles can traverse to get to somebody's house, that's going to impact the ability of public safety to serve the needs of those residents. So it all comes together.
And our citizens like to live in neighborhoods where they have a nice quality of life and quality places to visit, like parks that are also stabilizing impacts in their own neighborhood, including property values. So there are no good options here.
No, and I fear there would be that it starts I don't think we're gonna get here, but the worst case scenario would be that it starts a downward spiral, that because of those reasons, then those economic development opportunities that we've enjoyed here in downtown and throughout the city, that people start to look at whether Indiana as a whole is a place that they want to invest their dollars, so that we, along with every other municipality in the state, suffers from that component of these measures as well.
The market very much dislikes instability.
Mhm.
And we're already seeing a little bit of that play out in things like private investment here in Mishawaka. But certainly you pull from our services or cut from our services, it creates more instability. We do not think that's a good thing. We have strived as a city to be an outstanding example of how you run your government. One of the things that was a red flag was debt. They said there's $58 million in local debt. We have zero in our general fund. They saw some communities, including Elkhart, that had 70 to 90% of their budget in reserve. We try to stay between 15 and 20. We try to be the good actor to not get the bad boy list, make the bad boy list downstate. They paint with a broad brush. We do what's responsible, and we now are caught up in the consequences of trying to be responsible.
The news isn't good, but I have a lot of confidence that based upon people around this table and the department heads who are with us and working elsewhere in the building and with the support of the community, go back to your earlier comments, I think we're going to be able to weather this as well, if not better than many communities, but it won't come without some pain and some cost that is not the result of our decisions, but it's being forced on us by Indianapolis.
We, it's all hands on deck. This is not that's a taxpayer funded issue. We're on the ratepayer side. We are all in this together. It will be felt equally across the board. It may be that we have to try to cut $1 million here, save $1 million there, pull $1 million, and hopefully we can come close. But that's going to require buy-in from every one of us. It is a situation in the past where the city has been, we always share the wealth with our staff, with our people, with our programs. And now we're going to be coming to table asking maybe for others to share back in a time of consequence. And so it's all hands on deck, and it is we will get as creative as we possibly can. We're going to do things a little differently. It'll be felt by everyone. This will be. And so we'll appreciate any partnership and any collaboration we can, and any good suggestions and any thoughts you may have too.
I think I'm on solid ground to speak on behalf of the council that we are ready to partner with you on this and to play our part in trying to address the situation. So it's going to be an unprecedented budget year, probably an unprecedented few budget years, but we've worked well together in the past, and I would anticipate that we'll continue to do that moving forward.
Keep speaking, we keep talking about the 3 years. Is that SB 3 years only, and then it expires? I haven't.
It carries.
It's forever.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it,
Forever.
yeah. So, and the one thing that did stay is the maximum levy growth quotient, which is 4% now.
Right.
It's moved up and down. So growth, we don't know how it could impact us. Maybe it could impact us, positively, or right now we're not seeing a lot of future investment. So that will play into it. The TIF is getting beat up as well. So we are going to be losing our ability to invest in our infrastructure as we have.
We've counted so much on TIF over the years.
Yeah. So it's going to sunset largely in 2033.
Right.
So we have things that have to come out of that before, like sewer, the sewer bonus that the tip pays, it kind of keeps our rates lower. That has to come out because TIF's going away. And so we've already started that process. But for us to say invest in our infrastructure, we are going to have to form collaborative projects or processes with other units of government. You know, take the Microsoft project. We have invested, we should have a seat at that table, and we are very willing to work with all of our other units to make that a successful project, but it has to be successful for the area. So if we're going to build infrastructure like water and sewer, that's one part of it, but we also need the roads and the transportation, the overpasses and those things going forward as that area grows. Well, since our TIF is going to be limited, we have to rely on anchors like maybe a Microsoft. So we're going to have to capture increment to make sure that we can grow our infrastructure to service our growth and also to keep costs in check for our citizens. So it's all hands on deck. We're looking for all the partnerships we can get.
Well, we're going to continue the meeting at 3:00. This is just a little pause until 3:00, and we'll have the Baker Tilly presentation in the council chambers.
Yes.
See you right back at 3:00. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan, can you hear us?
There she goes. Oh,
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, Susan, thank you. We apologize for the wait. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's okay. We just hoped everybody was okay there on that end.
We're- Well, that's a good question. We don't know the answer.
So we have a couple announcement speakers and then we'll bring you in.
So this is the second part of the Mishawaka Common Council's Budget and Finance Committee. Basically, it's our comprehensive presentation from Baker Tilly on our city finances. Becky has handouts and she has plenty of hard copies, and if that, or not anymore. If you need more, Becky can email them to you, or it's on Compass. So if you want that, Becky has some that she can get those to you. Pass it over here to Mayor Wood so we can get the, he's going to say a few words and then we'll go on with the presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to apologize to all of you for this delay. Presenting our meetings to the public via online means is new to us. It started as of state law this last July. Obviously, we have some bugs to work out, and I can assure you they will be worked out. So again, I want to apologize for the inconvenience here, but thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us. And thank you for being here today. Members of our council, our city administrative team, our collective bargaining units, our community stakeholders, and even those in the press who may be online if they've waited an hour, but who also help us to share this important story with the broader public. As both Mayor of Mishawaka and President of AIM, I want to speak plainly and transparently about the significant financial issue threat facing not just our city, but also cities and towns across our state. Senate Enrolled Act 1, also known as the Property Tax Reform Bill, was passed with the intent of providing tax relief. While the goal may have been well-intended, the reality is that legislation has the potential to undermine the very ability of local government to deliver our essential services. While we support meaningful and targeted property tax relief as a city and efficient government services, the Indiana General Assembly passed legislation without meaningful input from stakeholders such as us as to the consequences of their action. As a result, in Mishawaka, we're projecting a $15 million loss over the next 3 years, roughly 20% of our city's general fund budget. That is not a small number. That is the equivalent of multiple departments worth of funding. This is not theoretical. This is real, and it's unprecedented. Let me be clear, as your mayor, I remain committed to leading with strength, with resolve, and with transparency. We are working hard to mitigate the fiscal impact in every way possible, and it's all hands on deck, whether it's utility or civil city budget, and to ensure that we continue to deliver the quality services our community has come to expect out of us and that they deserve. But unless something changes, we must be prepared for the fact that it may not be business as usual going forward. Today's presentation by our financial experts at Baker Tilly will walk us through the projected impacts and tough choices that may lie ahead. I encourage all of us to listen carefully, to ask questions, and to continue to work together as one Mishawaka team as we face this challenge ahead and head on. Want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank you for your cooperation. We're going to need that and full partnership with you going forward. As a member of AIM, I have already commissioned 2 committees across the state of Indiana. One is to look at the fiscal impact of what passed in this community and many others, and to draft a white paper this fall that we can then share with the members of our General Assembly. I've also commissioned a committee to look at government efficiency and how best, what we can do to mitigate some of the impacts of SEA 1. We have members of our own city on these committees, as well as members, practitioners all across the state of Indiana. They will also draft a white paper, and then it's all hands on deck. This impacts all of us, and we're going to call on you to help share our story with the state of Indiana coming into the next legislative session. And it's dire. And so that's why we're going to need you and your membership, your teams to go and help us tell of the consequences that we are facing here at the local level. And I wouldn't ask that unless it were vitally important. We have already begun the process of sharing our story with state legislature, with state legislators here in my office, with the governor last week, with several mayors. It's not unique to us. You might have seen where Elkhart is cutting $40 million, and a third of their budget is their impact that the mayor has shared through media. So we're all going through this. The impact is dire. Just to give you an example, 74% of our budget is public safety, based on our priority of public safety being priority number 1. 75% of our general fund budget. That's where our salaries are paid. That's where most of our service is provided. That's where those cuts are impacting. And in addition to that, we're losing public safety lit, which is our local option income tax, $4 million a year that come into the city of Mishawaka, gone in 2028, in addition to the impact of property tax into our general fund. Those are our biggest departments. And like I said, this impacts multiple departments. The impact of this is multiple departments worth of a big impact. So I will encourage you to really do a deep dive into this, really pay attention, ask good questions, share with your membership, share with your teammates in your departments. And you don't have to just ask questions here, feel free to, whether it's through our controller, Becky McGuire, through myself. We will do our best to help you, digest this and we've already started the impact, dealing with the impact of this in this budget right now that we're building for next year. So next year's budget will look a lot different than what previous budgets have looked like. So that's where we are. And I just wanted to shoot it to you straight. And I will remain committed to working with our council. They have expressed the same commitment working with us to do all we can to make sure that our services are the least impacted as possible. We are in business to provide service to our citizens, bottom line. And so we remain committed to doing that to the best extent we can. So thank you very much. And I'm going to introduce Susan Cowan from Baker Tilly, who will drive our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. Susan, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mayor Wood. I'm pleased to be here this afternoon. We've prepared for you a CFP, and then what I'm going to present now is a summary or an overview of that plan. I know that the plan can be somewhat numbers dense. I'm not going to say that the presentation is going to be any less so, because we cannot talk about at this point budgets or future plans or capital plans without taking into account the impacts of Senate Enrolled Act 1. So I'm first going to discuss some of those changes. They may be things that you are already aware of. I know was listening to your conversation that started at 2 o'clock. A number of you already obviously have a good grasp of what's going on. I'm just hoping to maybe provide some clarity, to provide where some of this impact is coming from and how the impact is happening. It's one thing to hear they're going to cut property taxes. It's another thing to see how it actually works. And I'm not saying that calculating property taxes is an easy thing to grasp. Apparently the Indiana system is somewhat convoluted compared to other states. But I'm hopefully going to provide some clarity. We'll talk about the funds that are in your CFP. Please feel free to stop me if you have questions. I'll try to give pauses at the end of sections. I'll call out what page of the presentation I'm on to hopefully keep us together since we don't have a display screen. But again, please feel free to stop me. If you do have specific questions too about the actual CFP report, we can discuss those as well. I have a copy of that open here on my screen too. So if you have something on a certain page you want to discuss, I'm more than happy to address that. So we'll go ahead and jump in here on, it's actually slide 3 of the presentation. Like I said, we're going to start talking about the impacts of Senate Enrolled Act 1. So as noted, we did not just address property tax or just address local income tax. They've addressed both at the same time and really upended the system, especially in local income tax. But for property tax, one of the main impacts is in the area of homestead property tax deductions and credits. This schedule shows the deductions and credits as planned for 25 and then going forward for the next 6 years, because this process is planned to step in over the next 6 years. So currently, any homestead property, which is defined as an individual's primary home and generally in most circumstances up to 1 acre of land that home is on, receives a standard deduction and then a supplemental homestead deduction. So during the assessment process, the assessor's office comes up with a gross assessed value of that property. Then we take the standard deduction off. The standard deduction is currently $48,000. And then the resulting amount has a 37.5% deduction that comes off of that. That generally ends up in the range of 45 to 55 to maybe 60% of gross assessed value, depending on the value of the home. So when we talk about net assessed values, you have the gross assessed, you take off the deductions, you come to net assessed. Net assessed is what property tax amounts are calculated on. So what is happening here is that over time, we will be reducing the amount of net assessed value across the state. In 2026, we still have the $48,000 standard deduction, but then we step up a little bit to a 40% deduction after that. Then we step up the next year, we drop the first one. We drop the first one from 48 to 40. And then the second part becomes 46%. So each of these steps, the next slide shows a little bit of what's actually happens. But by the end of the 6 years, you've stepped out the top, you've stepped out the standard deduction completely, just gone with a percentage deduction of the gross assessed value. It ends up being 2/3 of the gross assessed value. So that means no homestead property in the state would be assessed at more than 1/3. The property tax bill would not be calculated on more than 1/3 of the gross assessed value of a home. There are also additional now a supplemental homestead credit that's tagged on at the end. So after the net assessed value is multiplied times the tax rate, then you get up to an additional $300 off your bill. So if your property is currently at your circuit breaker cap max, which is the maximum amount up to 1% of the value of your homestead property, if you are already at that cap amount, you will now going forward get an additional up to $300 off, depending upon the amount of that calculated tax bill. So again, if homeowners aren't paying tax bills to their previous extent, the taxing units will suffer a decrease in revenue. There are also changes to 65 and over tax credits and to those tax credits for disabled homeowners. So those are other items that will come off of the bottom line of a tax bill calculation. On page 4, I'm showing an example of a home that is currently at the average value of the home in St. Joseph County. So according to Zillow, the average value of a home there is $220,150. So in 2020, the 2025 column shows we start with that gross assessed value on the top line. We take off the $48,000. Then it was 37.5% of the remainder. So we take off another $64,556. That leaves the base amount on which to calculate a tax bill of $107,594. Each year, we're making that change. I've just left the top line constant to really get the effect of actually how this changes. Is it to say that homes aren't going to continue to grow in gross assessed value? They certainly could, but that's on the assessor's side. Those rules change regularly too on how assessors assess homes. Right now, we know they're based upon market value. I can say though that personally, I'm not sure what it looks like in St. Joe County, but I know that when I received on my home in Carmel, my gross assessed value for 2026, it's only $100 difference than the previous year. Yeah. And in the 3 years prior to that, it had increased 45,000, 60,000, and 28,000. So things are leveling out based upon that market-based comparison. So you may not be seeing large incremental changes to gross assessed value going forward. And then at the same time, you're taking greater amounts off of gross assessed value to get to your net assessed value. So in this case, by 2031, the tax bill on this home will be calculated on $73,310. So they have that net assessed value times whatever the tax bill is. And I can tell you that in general, mathematically in property tax bills, as net assessed value decreases, rates increase. Because over time, as a taxing unit, you are allowed each year to grow your levy by a certain percentage. You discussed earlier that we know it's 4% this coming year. It's been as low as 1% in past years. It was 5% a few years ago. We, like I said, thought it was could have been up to 5.6% this year. So if that amount is increasing and your gross assessed and ultimately net assessed value are not increasing and possibly decreasing, you're going to have to drive up the rate that it will take to bring in your tax levy to your community. So increasing that rate makes the likelihood that more properties reach their cap values and don't pay those amounts in excess of cap values. Unfortunately, the city of South Bend, you mentioned earlier, the fiscal cliff situation, you're currently at about a 24% circuit breaker loss without any of these considerations of Senate Enrolled Act 1. So already up to 25% of your property tax is not collected. You do have something called property tax replacement credit. I'll discuss that in a few more slides. That is local income tax that's used to more or less dull the impact of circuit breaker in your community. So if you didn't have PTRC currently in St. Joseph County, your circuit breaker loss would be even greater. And when I get to it, we'll hear that PTRC goes away in 2028. So it's a combination of these things that's really creating the impact. There's another new type of deduction that will take place that has not previously been on the books. The properties that we call 2% properties, those are generally agricultural land, rental properties, second homes, assisted living facilities, anything that's not a first residential home and or agricultural land. Those have traditionally always been assessed for their tax value at full gross assessed value. There were not any deductions that came off of those properties. However, starting in 2026, there will each year now be a new stepped in standard deduction on these properties. So where we're going from being assessed at full value, by 2031, they will be assessed and taxed on 2/3 of their value. They still have a 2% cap, but they're going to decrease that value. Now, I discussed this with Becky previously, but because in the city of Mishawaka, your tax rates are currently, you have 4 different taxing districts in the city. Your tax rates as a whole for all the units that make up a district rate are they're in the high $3s to low $4 rates. So in general, for a 2% property to be at tax caps, it has to have at least a $2 tax rate. You're already at $3 and $4. So these properties are already at their maximum values. You're not going to get new revenue. Most likely it would be stagnant revenue on these properties, unless obviously you added new rental homes or there's some addition of gross assessed value to your base. But on your existing properties, you really can't expect additional revenue because they are already at their caps due to the tax rates in the city. There's also changes to business personal property. This links into the 3%, the commercial properties, the ones that are, they're still assessed at full value and they have a 3% cap, but there are new rules on how much of this business personal property can be excluded from those values. So if you have a lot of business personal property in your tax base, these new exemptions are removing floors, like minimum amounts that need to at least be put in place. So those are going to change. There's just differences that are going to take place. A lot of this will relate to what's in your TIF areas. So this will also decrease your net assessed value base as they are able to remove more and more of the business personal property from the tax base. I'm on slide 7. We discussed here that the MLGQ is capped at 4%. We are told currently, per the legislation, that after this year, it will go back to the calculation as it was prior to 2024. It was in 23 that the legislature first started, or most recently started, capping max levy growth. In 23, it had been 5%. And during that year's biennial budget session, they capped 24 and 25 to 4%. Now we have 26 also capped at 4%. The standard existing cap before that was 6%. We also understand that MLGQ is based upon a 6-year rolling average of non-farm personal income. So they're using wages and or growth in wages to determine how much your property tax levy should be allowed to grow. There was a large increase in wage in the state from 2020 to 2021. After 2021 will drop out of the calculation for max levy growth. And it's been our understanding that the calculation going forward will begin to drift down. So I think that may be part of the reason that they relaxed the max levy growth, and they said they're going to let it go back to the regular standard calculation. I may be wrong, but the way that we understand it, as 21 drops off, the MLGQ number will start to come back down towards 4 naturally. Maybe not right away, but over this, at least this 6-year phase in of the changes to homestead deductions, it should start to change. And this year, because of Senate Enrolled Act 1, there are no specific changes to the process you have to go through for the budget. However, starting in 2029, for the 2030 budget, you will have to have 2 separate public hearings. You'll have to have the one you've always had, which is just in general to advertise your budget, your rates, your tax levies that you're going to levy from the community. There now will be an additional one because currently everyone is eligible to take the max levy growth as it's calculated. As long as you fill out your budget forms right, you can claim your max levy growth. This year, you can claim an additional 4% in your controlled max levies. The additional public hearing starting in 29 will be to inform the public that you plan to take whatever the max levy growth quotient is for the ensuing year. So you have to have one open for public comment to discuss the community's plans to take full max levy growth, what you're eligible for. And then you have a second meeting no later than 15 days before your actual public hearing, where you talk about what you're planning to do for your budget. That's most of the major changes for property tax. For local income tax, this is the system that will kind of be turned upside down. Everything that's currently in place for lit, I'm on slide 8, will go away January 1 of 2028. So currently you have certified shares local income tax in the city, you have public safety, you have edit. The county also has a rate in place for that property tax replacement credit that I talked about. All of those expire January 1, 2028. So the summer previous, units will have to put in place new lit tax rates. So the county can adopt up to a 1.2% rate on the adjusted gross income of the entire county for what's called county special purpose lit. It will basically be a general purpose lit. We anticipate it will go in the general fund for the county, and they will use it to replace whatever existing types of local income tax they have. They can choose to adopt that fire protection and EMS lit. Again, the county adopts this on the AGI of the entire county, up to 0.4%. It primarily goes to fire territories, fire districts, and city fire departments. The county can also decide to give it to township fire departments and volunteer fire departments. And it is distributed based upon a calculation combined of population and service area. So if the county were to put that type of lit in place, the city would be eligible to get that. But that's totally up to the county whether they choose to put it in place or not. The county can also adopt a lit up to 2% for special units like townships or libraries. An airport authority or transportation authority would also count as that type. They, like I said, can do up to 0.2%, but only 0.5% can go to a specific type of unit. Now, a municipality such as the city of Mishawaka, greater than 3,500 in population, so in your county, that would be you and South Bend, will adopt or can adopt your own lit. It is not on the AGI of the entire county. It is now just on the adjusted gross income of the city of Mishawaka in specific. So it's likely that you would have 3 lit rates in your county in 2028. You would have the one that the county adopts for anyone that is not in the city of South Bend or the city of Mishawaka. There will be one specifically for the citizens of Mishawaka and one specifically for the citizens of South Bend. So you can adopt up to 1.2% yourself. And then the county also has the adoption or the option to do another 1.2% potentially for smaller municipalities. Now their 1.2% for the smaller units is the AGI of the whole county, less your AGI and South Bend's AGI. So it would be the townships, it would be New Carlisle, it would be Walkerton. It would not be the AGI of the city of South Bend or Mishawaka included in that calculation. And that's how we get to this potential max of 2.9% for any citizen in the county. You did not have in place a what's called a special purpose lit. If that were in place, that rate could have been maintained and those funds just go to the county generally for support of a jail. But there, you don't currently have one of those in place in St. Joseph County. So you will have to do this eventually annually. The first couple years you adopt the end of 27, it will stay in place till 2030. After 2030, you'll have to start adopting every year. It completely eliminates something called property tax replacement lit that I just mentioned a little bit ago. That is local income tax that actually looks like it comes back to the units as property tax. So it's decreasing the circuit breaker loss for the community. So individuals don't always notice a difference on their bill because of PTRC, but the taxing units notice a difference because of PTRC, because you're receiving more property tax than you would normally because of that amount coming back. In 2025, it's $55 million of local income tax that's being used to support property tax. And that is obviously spread across all units in the county. But as a tax bill comes in, PTRC is then applied back in an allocative manner so that each unit gets a share of whatever comes back based upon a percentage amount that's calculated at the beginning of each year. On page 9, there's just a little bit more explanation about those municipal lits for the over 3,500. Just as a reminder, what AGI is for what, and then the part where we talk about fire service and EMS lit. So yes, I heard you mention earlier, it's not general public safety. So this isn't to support police. This is only for fire and EMS services. There were some small changes to road funding in regards to city streets. So for your motor vehicle highway fund, you currently have to split each of the receipts that you get each month for motor vehicle highway. One goes into a general purpose unrestricted highway fund. The other one goes into a restricted fund that's used for preservation, construction, reconstruction of road surfaces. Currently, those are divided at a 50-50 ratio. If your previous year PACER ratings, those are road quality ratings, surface quality. If you are over a 6, you can make adjustments to those allocations of motor vehicle highway funds. You can actually put up to 60% now in your unrestricted fund and 40 in your restricted fund rather than the current 50-50. That may not make a great difference, but it is an option. It would start in July of 2026 if you're eligible. There are also some changes to the Community Crossings Program, which is a grant fund for roads. Currently, there's a big bucket that everyone gets to take from. Starting next year, some of the numbers in that bucket shifts down as they make some allocations to the city of Indianapolis that aren't currently there. And then they also divide out part of the money so that you have to have a wheel tax in place in order to be eligible for the second tranche of funding. The first tranche is available to everyone, and then the second smaller tranche is only available to those units with a wheel tax and surtax. You have receipts for wheel and surtax because St. Joe County currently has wheel and surtax in place, and you receive an allocated proportion of it. But per the legislation, that doesn't mean that you have your own. If you chose and weighed the ins and outs and does it make sense to put an additional tax on your citizens to maybe get not so much in revenue funding from that smaller tranche of motor vehicle highway funding, your rate that you put in place would stack on top of the county's rate. So it may not be something that makes sense to every community to do, but you can certainly do that if you like. You have to adopt those before the end of September this year, I believe, and they would take effect for next year. There's also some increased liability for bridges in municipalities now. If the bridge is in a municipality's corporate limits, the municipality is liable for maintaining it if it is less than 20 feet and is not part of the state highway system. So whereas prior to this, something may have been the responsibility of the county, it would now be the responsibility of your municipality. Again, taking already tight revenues that you are bringing in for road maintenance. I'll have a couple, some more information here on different types of funding. Again, some of these funding shifts, and then we'll look at each of the funds that we have in the report. So this slide just kind of covers a lot of the basic revenues that come in. So not only do you have property tax and local income tax, you have local fees for services like building permits. There are alcohol and cigarette taxes that come back to the community. In general, if you get property tax, you also receive supplemental motor vehicle taxes in each of your property tax funds. We have the aforementioned gas taxes that come back as motor vehicle, highway, and local road and street funding. There's riverboat wagering taxes that come back to the city. And then there's, fines and fees, court costs, interest. We will say that in general, when we look at revenues that are not specific to property tax or local income tax, those stay fairly constant. Even the motor vehicle taxes, we are not seeing large increases on an annual basis in those. So if your budgets are growing by 15 or 20% a year for road maintenance, but your revenues are remaining largely flat, that again points to you having to use cash reserves and having dwindling cash reserves over time, and eventually maybe not being able to support a budget. We've talked about the 4% already for this year. I just want to clarify, sometimes this is confusing, that people think immediately, oh, we built a new building, we have something new coming in, that means we'll get more property tax. That's not one of the things that factors into whether you get more property tax in a given year. Basically, your property tax levy has nothing to do with population. It has nothing to do with the actual values of the property, new developments. It has nothing to do with the amount of your budgets. The base levy was set back in the 70s, and it's grown a small amount each year. Like I said, previously maybe 1% to 2%, up to 4% the past few years at that capped amount. So oftentimes people think they have to spend their whole amount of budget to get all of their property tax levy the next year. That's just not the case. As currently, until that next step of SEA 1 steps in 29, you are eligible to take your full max levy growth every year. On page 15, I have information showing where your net assessed value has been as the city of Mishawaka since 2021 and where that relative rate has been. So you can see there in 23, when there was an increase in net assessed value, your property tax rate declined. So your net assessed value that year was $1,914,000,000. Your rate went from right at $2 in 2022 down to 1.875 in 2023. Then there was a bit of a contraction in 24. That net assessed value amount dropped a bit, so your tax rate went up. Then it's kind of bounced back a little bit in 25, and then if things play out as we anticipate them, that last red bar there for 25 will either stay about that height or it will start to dip, and then the line for the property tax will likely start to go back up. Circuit breakers, we kind of touched on those. We know that based upon property type, there's a maximum amount that any individual property owner can pay in a property tax bill. And as discussed, because of your rates in the city of Mishawaka, likely all of your 2% and 3% properties and probably a fair amount of your 1% properties are already at their circuit breaker caps. So it's a benefit to homeowners. It's property tax they don't pay, but it is a decrease in revenues to taxing units. So you maybe see that you get $40 million in levy, but if you have $10 million in circuit breaker, that means you only bring in $30 million from that levy for your various municipal services. This is just a definition of what those property tax caps are based upon assessed value. Then currently, the county as a whole loses about almost 129 million each year in property tax circuit breaker loss. So this sort of teal wedge there on page 18 shows the city of Mishawaka's loss. In 25, you lost $9.2 million in circuit breaker out of the whole 128 million in the county. And then we sort of have the rest of them divided up by type. You can see that the cities and towns, by the time you put their 44, almost 45 million with your 9 million, you're the largest chunk of circuit breaker. And we see that unfortunately across Indiana and many, many towns that once thriving large cities with a lot of industrial base that has shrunk over the years as businesses have closed or left, or property has been donated to non-taxable organizations and has been pulled off of tax rolls. We've seen this increase in circuit breaker. It happens in a number of places across the state. Mishawaka is not the only one, but there are many out there that are experiencing the same issues that you are with circuit breaker loss. So here we're sort of we're trying to illustrate what's going to happen because of this SEA1, how much additional loss you can expect. So the teal part is net property tax revenue. So if you were to add the blue part to the red part, that's, what you would have had total, and then you're losing the red part, so you're bringing in the blue. So now with SEA1, you're going to lose even more than you were before. So now instead of 2026 losing an estimated 9 million, this is across all of your property tax funds, you'll lose that plus an additional 1.9 million. So there's almost 10, or almost 11. Then there will be more as those additional deductions step in 27. So, and when we say lose more, this is set on a base of the 2025 circuit breaker loss. So when you go back and compare to 2025, you're going to lose 2 million more in 26. When you compare to 25, you're going to lose 2.3 million more in 27. The problem is when PTRC goes away in 2028, you're set to lose about an additional almost 7 million more. These are numbers based upon Legislative Services Agency numbers that they put out in April. We believe that these are a worst case scenario, and Baker Tilly, along with a number of other organizations in the state, are in the process of developing their own model to determine just how valid these estimates are. So we feel comfortable that for right now, using these or the numbers that recently the DLGF has put out, which are again slightly different, even though we were under the understanding that they were supposed to be using the Legislative Services numbers, that either one of those bets would be safe as you're preparing your budget for this ensuing year. We'll know more. We'll have more information by the time you get to 2028 to help when that larger loss steps in. So this next slide is an attempt to show what is happening as these changes are coming through on a specific tax bill example. So I went back to that average home price or home value in St. Joseph County, that $220,150. So the top line there is what the net assessed value is after all of the deductions are applied. So on a 1% homestead property, it would be assessed on $107,594. I'm specifically using your Mishawaka Clay tax district at 005. They have a rate of 4.1928. So almost $4.20 per $100 of net assessed value. When we multiply that times the 107, we divide the total by 100 because Indiana taxes on $100 increments. We then get a calculated tax bill of $4,511. Now, this is a 1% property, so up to 1% of that $220,150 is the maximum bill that the taxpayer would pay. So the most the taxpayer is going to pay this year is $2,202. The PTRC calculation is about $676. That doesn't even get the homeowner close to the cap amount. The calculated bill is still way above the actual bill that they will pay. That there's another $1,600 there in circuit breaker loss that won't be collected. So the property tax owner, the homeowner, is going to pay the $2,202. What's going on though behind the scenes is that PTRC calculation, that $676 will be distributed to the taxing units. So the homeowner didn't have to pay it in their property tax bill. Granted, it's coming out of their local income taxes, but it will be distributed back to the taxing units based upon their distributive share of the tax rate. So in most cases, the city of Mishawaka's rate is roughly 50% of the total tax bill. So in essence, you'd get 336, 330, I'm not doing math very well right now, sorry. 338, that's it, dollars of that 676 to come back to go towards your general fund, your CCD, your park, and your motor vehicle highway fund. Now, granted, this doesn't look like a lot, $676 per one, but that's per one household. When you multiply that per however many households there are, and this is an average amount, so there will be some houses worth less and some houses worth more, and this amount will fluctuate. So all told, the homeowner's paying $2,202, but the county is collecting $2,878 to distribute to the taxing units. So when I say PTRC dulls the effect of circuit breaker, this is what I mean. The total loss would have been substantially more were that PTRC not in place. But then when we get to 2028 and PTRC goes away, the next column, I've left the amount of the property flat. I've left the tax rate flat. Now, likely that will change, but if you throw too many variables in, it muddies the water. So just to look at specifically what will happen here based upon the changes, now we'll have a net assessed value of $91,272. The tax rate likely will be more than almost 420, but we're using that one currently. So the new calculated tax bill is $3,827. There's no longer a calculation of PTRC. So there will be a $1,625 gap there between the amount that they can pay, which is $2,202. Plus, we're also going to take off that new $300 supplemental homestead credit. So now the homeowner is going to pay $1,902. The county is going to collect $1,902. So that's around $900 less than they did in 2025. So that's where we see the bigger leap, the bigger change in 2028. It's because of that PTRC no longer being part of the property tax calculation. 2031, I stuck in here, but it's a bit misleading because by the time we get down to 73,000 net assessed value, your tax rate will have to be somewhere here up in the area of $4.80 or almost probably $5 per $100 of net assessed valuation because of what's gone on to get by the time your levy has grown 3 to 4% each year, you would have to have a higher rate. So this is a bit artificial, but it will eventually somewhat even out over time. Then after 2031, the calculation would stay where it is with the 66% deduction in net assessed value going forward. We'll jump to local income tax. I'm sorry, this does kind of jump around just a little bit, but as I already talked about, the different types of lit you have here in the county, how we come to the current rate that you're paying of 1.75 countywide for local income tax. These amounts are what has been being distributed across the county as a whole. So you've got 33 million currently going out in certified shares. That goes to the county, all municipalities, townships, fire districts. If you have fire districts, airports, it goes to all different types of units. Public safety lit, there's $36 million that's being distributed. You have a share of it. The county has a share, South Bend, the other municipalities, New Carlisle, Walkerton, they all have distributive shares of that, but it does not go to townships. Economic development is the same. They're distributing about 37 million there. Again, not going to townships. And then this 55 million down here that's being spread out across the tax bills as PTRC to soften the blow of circuit breaker. So this schedule, I believe one of you asked earlier about what have your specific lit receipts been in the past. So this slide 22 is showing what your local income tax distributions have been for the city of Mishawaka the past 4 years, since 22 through 25. So I believe Becky noted that there was a dip in 25. It came in less than 24. We don't have estimates yet for 26, although the state budget agency does have available the top level amounts that will be distributed. But again, it's kind of misleading because it's for all different types of local income tax. So, for example, in 25, all lit across the county that was distributed was 162 million. In 2026, all lit that goes all across the county will be a 166, almost 167 million. So it would stand to reason that it's likely that you will see some bit of an increase come back in local income tax in 26. I can't speak to exactly how much because it's currently distributed based upon your levy as a share of all the levies in the county. So if Mishawaka's levies are, say, 32% of all the levies in St. Joe County, you would get 32% of a specific type, each specific type of local income tax. So that's how that will play out. Those estimates are supposed to be out on an individual basis for each unit by August 15th. And the DLGF puts those out. So those should be coming fairly soon. The next page is where we've given estimates of your potential local income tax receipts and after 2028. Now, we don't know what AGI is going to be at all yet in 2028. So we've used current AGI amounts of what we believe the amount would be for the city of Mishawaka times a couple rate options. So in the report, I believe I show 3 options. This one's, I'm just showing the 1.2 and a 0.8. There's also a 1.0 option in the report. So if you were to adopt, if the city were to choose to adopt 1.2 for your municipal lit only, that would bring in roughly, we believe, almost $19.5 million, which is in excess of the amount you have for certified shares, public safety, and economic development. However, we don't know. There's not a report that tells us exactly how much of that 55 million in PTRC comes to the city of Mishawaka. So it may be 6.5 million. It may be more than 6.5 million. But it looks like currently this 19 million at its max amount is not quite enough to get you what you need going past budget year 2028. So this is something you'll have to keep your eye on for the next 2 years. Hopefully the Department of Revenue will be providing more information because they don't currently collect AGI information on a city by city basis. They do it on county-wide basis, but we know that it's going to take them a while to get that up and going. We also don't know what the legislature might change. So as we get closer to 28, you'll need to evaluate where your AGI is heading, what it looks like, because that's something that's sensitive to economic conditions. And if there are, mass layoffs or something like that, or a particular stress in a certain economic part of our economy, that could create a decrease in your AGI. So you may, choose to put the 1.2% in place and not get near this 19 million that we're estimating right now, because we don't know for sure what will happen over the next 2 years. Here's an example of if you were to enact your max lit, the county enacted all of their lits at a max rate. What does that change for an individual worker, a citizen in the county, as far as their lit that's coming out of their property taxes, or I'm sorry, payroll taxes, their adjusted gross income? So the current amount is 1.7%. If you go to the max under the new structure, it's 2.9. That's a difference of 1.15%. So if an individual earns $65,000, after certain deductions and credits that they can claim, they're probably paying roughly $1,000 a year, almost $1,100 a year in local income tax. Under the new rate, that would be a little over $1,800 a year. That's a difference of $717. Then currently, the average household income in St. Joe County, city of Mishawaka, is $73,025. So they're currently paying about a little over $1,200 at that max rate, it would be at $2,000. So that's an increase of about $800. And then a $100,000 salary, after those deductions and credits, they're paying roughly almost $1,680. That will go up to about almost $2,800. So an increase of around $1,100. So I believe someone mentioned earlier, even though they may be paying less in property taxes, if all of these lits get put in place, they would end up paying a net amount of more because it would increase their lit taxes more than it would decrease their property taxes potentially. Again, because a lot of them are at circuit breaker and their property tax bills probably aren't going to change drastically. Now I have summaries of each of the funds in the financial plan. So first is your general fund. This chart is also in the report. So we've got a green line that shows the ideal max amount that you would have in reserve in your funds. That green bar that represents a 50% operating balance. Operating balance is your ending balance divided by your operating disbursements for the year. So by your budget. So you can see currently in 22, you're right there almost to that 50%. 23, you're at that 50%. 24, you're right at 50%, and it starts to decline. Then as these changes are shifting, as the SEA loss is coming in, as PTRC is going away, unfortunately, we're estimating down there potentially a negative $15 million by 2028. And we know that you have 2 to 3 years to look at this, to figure out what you can do, to learn more about incoming lit, to maybe hopefully enact some change, get some things maybe reversed potentially at the state legislature, but we don't know that that will happen. As when I discussed this report previously with Becky and the mayor, I said, we always unfortunately tend to show up and give you really bad news and say lots of doom and gloom and negative numbers. In the past, the city has always done, as you can see through 22 to 24, a pretty good job of bouncing back. Now that's because of things like interest rates that have gone up. That's because your lit fund was maybe in excess of its balance at the state. So you were given a lit supplemental distribution. There will not be lit supplemental distributions anymore after 2028. What's collected will be dispensed. So that may mean you get a little bit more upfront, but you don't get those sort of unanticipated windfalls anymore. So we're concerned about your long-term ability to continue to bounce back like you have in the past. So even though you spend roughly 90 to 95% of your budgets, if your budgets are getting larger, you're still spending more year over year and still potentially using more of your cash reserves. Just some of the things that we noted in general about your budgets that you did, Becky mentioned earlier, you shifted levy in 25 from your general fund to your motor vehicle highway fund. So that was about a $3.5 million decrease this year. That was part of that dip we saw for 2025 because you didn't bring in quite as much revenue there. And then your lit was down a little bit this year. So then also some of those supplemental motor vehicle taxes also went to your motor vehicle highway fund. However, in your budgeted expenses in 25, they were actually your budget was 5.4 million more than what you actually spent in 24. So regardless of where your revenues were, your disbursements, your planned disbursements for this year were greater than in 24, what you actually spent. And we always know when we look at your budgeted amounts, we know that you may spend less, but we always take into consideration that you will spend everything you plan to spend, plus additional appropriations and encumbrances. So I know this is difficult, but as much as absolutely possible, try to plan your budget so that your recurring expenses are matching your receipts for a given year. It's what we call balanced budgeting. The more that you, as we've seen kind of by that downward slope, the more that you have budgets that are in excess of receipts, that's when you use cash reserves. Interest earnings have been declining a bit. And so in combination with that, just general offerings of percentages in the market, with the fact that you may be decreasing the base amount on which you're calculating those earnings, we anticipate that your interest will decrease over the next few years as well. So in your general fund, we sort of pointed that out earlier on the, on that yellow, the bar where there was yellow and then red and then teal. Granted, that was all of your funds subtotal. But specifically on your general fund, you're gonna lose, the estimate is about $1.5 million additional this year on top of your regular circuit breaker amount of what I said was around 22 to 24%. Then next year would be about an additional 1.8, and then when that PTRC kicks in, you'd lose about 5.3. And again, that assumes the allocations that we have set up in the report. We know that you could shift property tax levy back and forth between motor vehicle, highway, general, and park, but just that, and that could shift those losses again as well. And so here's your motor vehicle highway. You can see where in 24 it was down quite a bit. So that's why they added the amount of property tax in 2025, came up a little bit, but then it will continue to step downward as well. In this case, your 2025 budget was actually about 1.8 million more than your 2024 expenses. I believe I mentioned previously, we don't see much in the way of increase in these motor vehicle highway funds, maybe $10,000 a year. They were increased in 2016, and then immediately the next year they took a big chunk out and gave it to the state police, and they just have not done anything to supplement that back. The state's response is generally to put a wheel and surtax in place if you need more in your local road and street. We already talked about the 50-50. Sometimes that division of funds can cause problems for motor vehicle highway because you'll end up with an excess in the capital and not enough in the unrestricted where you're trying to pay your street employees from. Local road and street is very similar. It's gas tax, again, not changing greatly. Here you were a bit above the 50%. This is largely going to be for capital projects only. We did estimate going forward, you would be creating budgets that are roughly equivalent to receipts. That's about $964,000 a year for next year and the coming years. In 25, the budgeted expenses were about 580,000 over 24 actual, and you would be using about $662,000 of cash reserves this year estimated. Park and recreation. This fund, you have not only property tax receipts, but you have park receipts. Those are sensitive to a number of things. Weather, primarily, are there maintenance on park facilities, obviously economic items. If people can't afford to come and use facilities, then they're not paying those fees. So this one you're supporting with property tax. And we're noticing that one is not necessarily going negative, but going towards that 15% lower red line ideal, balance. You don't try not to get too much below that 15% is ideal. And this one you would lose there as well, about 265 this year, up to almost $1 million in 2028 of revenue loss for this one because of SEA. So you put generally, obviously the most levy goes in your general fund, then the next largest amount you put in your park, and then after that your motor vehicle highway fund. So park will be right there in the middle of taking a chunk of that loss, and then motor vehicle highway and CCD coming up at the end. Your public safety lit. This one, as we noted, you'll be getting a general, like a city municipal lit that we expect that you will be putting in your general fund. We expect that these appropriations from public safety will at some point have to move to your general fund as well. Right now, we anticipate that you may have up to $3 million there at the end of 27. We believe that the State Board of Accounts will tell you that you can spend those amounts from their original location for their original purpose until they're exhausted. So you may not have to flip everything to your general fund immediately. There's maybe some timing there that you can take advantage of and spend down some of these before you have to start spending the other that's in your general fund. But that again depends on ultimately the guidance we get from the State Board of Accounts. In this case, there was budgeted expenses increased in your public safety, almost $2.8 million over your 2024 actual. Normally, you've been able to add cash reserves to this fund over the past few years. I know, like you said, public safety is one of your largest, is your very largest expense line. So it makes sense that you would be, spending a lot from this fund and spending a lot from your general fund for public safety. At the bottom, we just discussed more about SCA one. We've kind of already gone a lot over that lit and the potential types of lit that you would have available. So I'm not going to hit those again. Let's see the same thing in a second on the edit sheet, because next is your edit fund. Again, this one, we're also anticipating maybe some remaining revenues there after 2027, because we're saying we've anticipated budgets that would be equal to your receipts in this fund. So again, you may have some reserves there at the end of 27 and 28 that you can then use from this location first before you'd have to go and take whatever your new general purpose is. Next is your CCD fund. This is a levy fund, but it is outside of your max levy. It's a separate rate that you as a city council have adopted at 5 cents. So this one is very dependent upon net assessed value. So we could see revenues decline in this one, because if net assessed value is declining, you're applying that 5 cent rate directly to the net assessed value. So your revenues may decline in this if your net assessed value drops, which we expect it to in some shape or form, either stagnate or decrease. This one isn't going to be a capital projects fund. As mentioned, it mainly supports your IT department and IT projects. This one, like I said, is probably, I think, the lowest amount of loss because it's the smaller levy. Does someone have a question? Okay, thought I heard something. So we just have some concluding comments. We've talked a lot about SEA 1 and what it's going to do. So it's definitely a time when you need to work, your department heads all need to work together, come up with a plan of attack, use priority-based budgeting, determine those top level things that you have to accomplish, and then determine if you can make the other ones work too. So I think lit PTRC is one of the biggest concerns for you, because you probably can't recoup the full amount that you're receiving in lit PTRC through your 1.2% that you can adopt as a municipal unit. We also, and if there's any increases in unemployment, that affects your amount of AGI in the county. So, and the city specifically. So that would limit how much you could potentially put in place for that lit. Assessing your long-term capital needs. If you have capital plans, update them, really brainstorm what's coming up in the future. They haven't removed your ability to do property tax bonds if that ever became an issue. So if that's something that you need for capital, that could be a consideration in the future, although I know no one likes to do that unless they absolutely have to. And it's hard because your general fund is the most in demand, but if you need to give more money to another fund like your parks or your motor vehicle highway, that's where it has to come from, is your general fund. It's the one that gets hit the hardest. And we think that maybe by 2030, there will be some issues there with long-term sustainability, as you've seen those ending balances declining significantly. And again, we never know what the legislature is going to do next. Will they go back and correct this? Will they make it worse? Because the original plan for this year was worse. And this, it's sad to think that this is a better option than what they originally had in place. But this is what they've come to. And we've heard rumblings that they're going to fix it, but we don't know exactly what part's going to be fixed or revised. But that is a potential, and you just have to stay on top of those things. So, the report, as we made it for you, is meant to be a tool. We update it for you each year. If you need more frequent updates, we are definitely happy to do that for you. However, as we get new information on local income tax or new information on potential other sources of revenue or other changes that may affect your revenues, it's easy to keep this updated. Again, keeping your budgets in line with your receipts or as close as you can is one of the best strategies you can put in place to try to maintain your cash reserves. And general just keeping on top of your planning. And like I said, that priority-based budgeting be, very crucial this year as well. So that brings me to the end of this presentation. I know nobody piped up with anything. Were there any comments or any questions you have at this time?
Any question? I had one quick question about the business personal property. Wasn't there $1 million exemption at one point? Did they get rid of that? It was not supposed to 80,000, then 1 million, then 2 million.
Yeah. Jump back to that one. That's the one that I have the most problem grasping. So there was a 30% floor for the equipment placed in service after January 2025. So if you have equipment that was before January 1, 2025, it still falls under existing rules. It's after anything that's new this year that changes where that floor is removed. So they can end up actually removing all of it from the calculation. Or if there's an existing TIF area. So the de minimis exemption it's now, these are the rules. If it was 1 million before, it's now 80, and then 2 million. So you can, those are the amounts you can exempt from your personal property.
Okay, I thought there was $1 million one, but it doesn't really matter.
I think maybe potentially in a previous version, but this is what the final version ended up at.
Okay, thank you. That
You're
makes
welcome.
sense.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hickson.
If we can, I want to go back to slide 21 on the current lit allocation for St. Joe County.
Uh-huh.
In my recollection is that these current numbers and the current combined lit total is not set to the statutory cap that would be applicable to St. Joe County.
That's true. It is not. So if you look at the line where it says total lit expenditure lit, they're under where it says certified shares, public safety, economic development. The cap you would have there, the maximum amount is 2.5%. The county adopted rate is currently 1.5. And so there is remaining rate capacity through the end of 2027 that they could choose to put another 1.35% in place.
And you anticipated my next question. I don't recall in any of the legislation that the ability to be able to alter that rate for the next 2 years was impacted at all, and that there's
It's
still.
not. And we've talked to a number of
That's
units that are planning to put some more in place between now and the end of next year, particularly for public safety type functions.
Would it
So-
be possible for you to calculate what, if just for, I guess, exemplary purposes, is it possible to take the rate and put it at the max and then determine what the additional revenue stream for Mishawaka would be if that rate was taken to the max?
We could come up with an estimated amount for that, yes, because like I said, these are whole county rates, but we can figure out what the relative proportion is for the city of Mishawaka. Part of the public safety is PSAP lit that goes just to the county. So not the full 36 million isn't given out to all units. It just goes to, there's a lump that comes off the top that goes to the county, and then the remainder goes to the city of Mishawaka. But yeah, we could determine that for these types.
And just,
Did you say to the max, to the 2.5% max?
I'd be interested to see that number, and then we can stair step it down once we see what the maximum would look like. And then going back to the PSAP, just PSAP component of public safety lifts, if my memory serves, and when we did that, that actually by making the adjustment with regard to the PSAP component of the public safety lit, it actually protected our general fund so that we were no longer having to pay out of the general fund our allocation to PSAP, but rather it was the lit that covered the Mishawaka share.
Right. That's, yeah. And because I don't remember at the time, did they increase the rate on the public safety lit totally to get the additional amount?
I don't believe we did. I think what we
Okay.
did was
They just-
reallocate. So that
Okay, they
we
just reallocated it to
earmarked it,
PSAP then.
earmarked
Okay,
it.
yeah. Yes, because it stopped you from having to make a contractual payment to the 911 call center.
So do you have an idea what happens to that after 27?
The county will have to pay for any PSAP expenses out of their county general 1.2% that they can assess on individuals in the county. So there won't be a specific PSAP anymore. Now, if they can't support it on the share that they can take of the 1.2, I'm not sure that there's any limitation or restrictions on what they could still ask from any municipal units. In most cases, we're seeing by counties being able to take the 1.2 by themselves, they were getting more than was necessary. And they also have an option on the non-municipal or the small municipal lit. If they take if the county starts with giving themselves the full 1.2, they can adopt up to 1.2 for those under 3,500 municipals and keep 75% of that for themselves. Again, I suppose that all depends on how close the county's trying to keep people, in a whole situation with the smaller towns and trying to make sure they're replacing their revenue for them. But if the county so chose and they needed the operating revenue, the statute gives them the ability to keep part of that small municipality lit.
My recollection is that even though there's going to be the change with regard to the funding of PSAP, that the obligation that we and other municipalities have to continue to engage in a combined service model hasn't been altered. At least I haven't heard anything about that.
I do not believe there's anything that alters that obligation. No.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I have a question. If there was one thing that you would recommend to us to take up with our legislatures that would have an impact, would it be, is it PTRC that's not going to be available in the lit PTRC in 2018? Or what would your advice be if we were to talk with our legislators about one or two things that could be a major fix for us?
I mean, the combination of doing everything all at once is the big picture problem. And then in your case specifically, yes, the fact that the county was using PTRC, which is what it was meant to be used for. They were using it the way that it was meant to be used, to supplement the individual units so that they did not have because it would have been a more extreme effect had it not been in place. But it's really hard to pin down just one thing because it's all so intertwined. I mean, I don't think they're going to go back and say, okay, then we won't do the additional homestead deductions, or we won't do the 2% because of, I mean, it's so, and it's different for each county where the impact comes from, because there are some counties out there that have huge amounts of PTRC in place. They have low tax rates. So what they're doing is effectively giving their homeowners discounts on their tax bills. So when PTRC goes away, the homeowners' tax bills are just going to go up. The county's still going to collect the revenue. It's going to be more of an impact to the negative for their homeowners. So, in your case, yes, it's the PTRC, but I don't see them again exempting that like they did the lit special purpose and saying, okay, we'll leave PTRC in place, but you have to figure the rest of it out. I think their thought is that by allowing you to do these different special types of lit, you should be able to make the county whole completely with all units, even though, as we've noted, that does not seem to be the case in all situations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Here, anything to wrap it up? Good. Thank you, Susan. Appreciate
You're very welcome.
all your information. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. If anybody has follow-up questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.